Good afternoon, everybody. We're excited to welcome you all to our webinar on making sense of CDFI data and certification for certification and award compliance. Just a few housekeeping rules before we dive in. First, we will have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar after the presentation. So if there are any questions that pop up during the presentation, please feel free to drop them into the meeting chat, and then we will address those at the end. Also, this session is being recorded, and the recording will be posted to the our company YouTube channel following the webinar. So with that, we can begin. So first, I'll cover our agenda here. Number of topics for this webinar. First, we'll start with the target market lending and essentials for your TLR. Then we'll go beyond the TLR to explore other areas of data and certification compliance. We'll look at some of the data systems and strategies that can help you, obtain and retain your CDFI certification and your award compliance status, and then end with a call to action where we'll talk about looking at your lending through year-to-date 2025. Before we get into the meat of the presentation, I wanted to give a brief introduction of us as a company. So we are a data analytics CUSO that helps credit unions maximize growth, impact, and performance. We empower credit unions to adapt and thrive by leveraging proprietary data and technology alongside deep subject matter expertise to drive smarter strategic decision making. All with the aim of helping credit unions beat banks. Got three main areas of expertise as a firm. So we've got under growth, we have field of membership and charter expansion. We've got our merger network, select employer group, and B2B growth strategy, as well as consumer marketing and branding. On the performance side, we help credit unions with performance analytics and benchmarking, advise on branching strategy, as well as product development. And then on the impact side, which is more focused on what we're talking about today, we've got our CDFI consulting and software solutions. Solutions aimed at helping credit unions obtain and retain their NCUA low income designation. And our impact analytics. This is our social impact reporting dashboard. Moving on, gonna do a brief intro to our speakers today. So first, myself, Jason Rustin, Advisory Director of our Beneficial Regulatory Programs business line. So that encompasses our CDFI business as well as our NCUA low income designation business. I've got over 15 years of experience in consulting with a focus on financial and performance management, data analytics, business process improvement, and organizational change management. Prior to joining CUCollaborate, I worked primarily in the federal government consulting space at Booz Allen Hamilton and Grant Thornton. Next, I will pass the mic over to Jeff Bailey to let him intro himself.
Thank you, Jason. Hi, everyone. Great to be here with you. My name is Jeff Bailey. I'm the manager of our CDFI Advisory Services program, and I've been in the CDFI industry for over 10 years now, both as a consultant, but also as a practitioner. I was a loan officer at a couple of different CDFIs out here in the Pacific Northwest. So our CDFI Advisory Services cover a range of CDFI deliverables that we work on with clients, ranging from grant writing to award compliance and certification matters. And everything that we'll be touching on today contributes to the successful certification as a CDFI, and also being able to not only obtain certification but maintain it as well. So we can get right into it, Jason. Thank you. And, so we're really going to be starting this on the basis of the target market lending requirement We can go to the next slide, please, which is demonstrated to the CDFI fund through the transaction level report. So, for those who are maybe newer to the industry, the CDFI industry, or those who have been in it for a while now, the 60% target market lending requirement is sort of the most well-known requirement for CDFI certification, in that in order to be a CDFI, 60% of loan originations need to be to approved target markets. The way in which that 60% lending threshold is demonstrated to the CDFI fund is through what's called the transaction level report, or the TLR. The TLR is uploaded into the CDFI fund system known as AMIS, and then the target market calculator identifies the lending in the TLR as being above or below 60%, which either enables a certification application, or for those who are already certified will be part of the new compliance requirements for certification. TLRs have been around for a long time, but they were historically only associated with award compliance. So if you got a grant from the CDFI fund, that would be part of your reporting. But now it's part of actually being a CDFI itself, either as a first step for an application or as part of the annual compliance, annual certification reports. We can go to the next slide, please. So there's a couple of different types of TLRs, and depending on your credit union situation, you would find yourself filing one or the other. The TLR represented on the left column is called the ATLR, abbreviated TLR. The ATLR is required for a certain type of CDFIs, whereas the TLR, also known as the full TLR, is required for others. So if you're a first-time applicant, you'll be submitting the ATLR. If you're certified already, but you don't have an active assistance agreement, you'd also be submitting the ATLR. If you have an active FA award, that would put you into the full TLR category. And you'll notice here there are green check boxes for the loans originated and the loans purchased lines, indicating that the relevant body of data that's submitted to either the ATLR or the TLR is the same. It's all loans originated and all loan purchases, which is not your portfolio outstanding number. So this is a common confusion point. Just to clarify, the relevant information for the TLR is not what your outstanding portfolio may be, but rather what your loans originated for the period were. So for example, we just submitted TLRs for the 2024 fiscal year. So it would be all new loans originated from January 1st through December 31st. Any loans that's still on your books but were originated previously would not be relevant for that report. Finally, for the scope of the two different TLRs, you'll see the number of data points in the ATLR is 29, whereas the full TLR is 79. Obviously, that's a 79 data points per loan that you'll be submitting to the CDFI fund. Sounds like a lot. It is a lot. But a couple of ways to think about that. One, if you're submitting the TLR, the full TLR with those 79 data points, that means you've received an award from the CDFI fund and you're doing the right thing and you're on the right track. So it's a sort of good problem to have in many respects, but it does represent a lot of information for the lending that that you'll be representing in the TLR. We can dive into that discrepancy or the difference between the two here a little bit more in the next slide. So the 29 or 79 data points, they share some characteristics, and they differ. First of all, it's important to note that the CDFI fund publishes full guidance on both versions of the TLR, and we have a small screen grab here on the slide to give you the kind of a preview of what type of information is available in those guides. The guidance from the CDFI fund goes data point by data point and provides the information and explanations of what is needed to be able to submit or complete the transaction level report. Some examples of the type of information that you would be submitting in the ATLR are what you might consider to be sort of basic information about a loan: the amount, the address, the purpose, borrower type, loan status. Those things are, generally applicable to most loan types and are often readily available. What can be more challenging is in the full TLR. You would submit those first 29 data points that are in the ATLR, but also some more in-depth information. Interest rate type, not just the interest rate. So is it fixed or variable, for example? Not going to read all of these, but NAICS codes for the business type for any commercial loans. That is, I would say, in the scope of ATLR or full TLR, a more in-depth data point to be able to provide. So one thing to consider, we have this bullet point here with the big tent of CDFIs, is there's a lot of different types of CDFIs. There's a lot of different type of lending that's out there. So while we are talking about the potential for 79 data points, not all fields are going to be relevant to all credit unions on all transactions. I referenced earlier the NAICS code for commercial loans. Well, if you're a credit union that only does consumer lending and you don't have commercial loans, then that's not a field that's going to be relevant to you. So 79 is a lot, but then you start whittling it down depending on what's relevant. Another consideration that we'd offer here before we move on to the next slide is just the information that is being provided here. Another field in the full TLR that is listed up here as an example is the jobs created and retained. Frankly, not one we see tracked very well among clients, and their folks are just getting started in being able to capture that data when they become CDFIs. All of this data gets submitted to the CDFI fund, and then that enables the CDFI fund to be able to report out on the impacts of CDFIs and the impact that CDFI funding has, and can do so on a congressional district basis. And I imagine folks who are attending this call are very interested in current events related to the CDFI fund and what the future of the program is, and would say that full participation in this reporting strengthens the case for CDFIs nationally. And so we think that it's very much within the collaborative framework of contributing to this larger project so that there continue to be wide benefits from the program. We can move on to the next slide, please, where we'll talk about the this is pretty in the weeds, but when you actually go to complete these files, there are 5 different types of TLR files that will ultimately be submitted. And the 5 files that they're CSV files, they're have very strict data validation requirements, but sort of the big picture is that the composite of the 5 different types of files represent all of the lending that you did over the course of the year. And it's broken up by consumer loans. They have their own file. Non-consumer loans have a different file structure. Then we also provide the locations of the non-consumer loans. We provide information related to loan purchases, and depending on the type of target market methodology you'll be using, you may even submit information around your financial services for the TLRs as well. If you're talking about the different TLR files, you're really talking about the nitty-gritty of completing this requirement. Having gone through this recently, it's can be a very detailed process, and not breaking these loans up in the different ways in which they're viewed is not always I would say kind of self-explanatory when looking through this type of information, but this exercise is really taking the information from your systems and translating them to a standard format to the CDFI fund. So, we're talking about the final outputs here, but what goes into it? That's really taking advantage of the effort and strategy early on is essential to completing the TLR submissions in a manner that is going to be accurate and efficient. So the very first step is familiarizing yourself with the requirements of the different types of TLRs. If you receive an award, spend some time looking through that full TLR guidance document. If you're early in your CDFI journey, Going through that abbreviated TLR guidance document will be helpful to understand the breadth of the information that is required for that ATLR submission. And then as you're doing so, consider how that information is collected or recorded. For example, the NAICS code. At what point does that information get logged? Is it in the loan application? Is it during underwriting? Is it in the core system? Is there even a field available for that information? Is it optional for whoever is completing the form? There's a lot of processes and decision points that are in place that on the front end that will result in a clean query at the end of the process to be able to report on your data, or a process that requires a lot of backfill because there is information that wasn't included during intake or when being able to produce a report. A common pain point we see here is there are often multiple sources required for the TLR. This is one of the ways in which the fact that the CDFI funds system differs from other standard reports in the credit union industry. So, for example, the CDFI fund wants to see all of your in-house originations and all of your loan purchases. And those could potentially be coming from a mortgage processing system or your core system. And some information like borrower household income could be something that is in a loan origination system, but not necessarily in the core system. And so you've got to pull all these different sources together to produce the full TLR. And being able to understand how those reports may be collected together is an important step for an efficient and effective TLR process. And then finally, there's the actual uploading themselves, utilizing the CDFI funds TLR system. Frankly, it's cumbersome. It's a challenge. We do a lot of these, and it's even can be difficult at times for us to be able to navigate this system. So, be there early in the upload process is what we would suggest. It can often take some time to get those completed. And learning how to navigate that system is in itself a task in the process. So you can see from all of these different considerations that there's really a people, process, and tech solutions approach, and there's, depending on any credit union's particular pain point, maybe one or all three of those aspects that go into producing a complete TLR. And it's very much worth mentioning to plug our ability to assist in this process. Like I said, we do a lot of these. To dive into this brand new is a big undertaking. I applaud anyone who wants to jump in there, but we have some expertise here that we think really be of value to our clients. And so please let us discuss with you the opportunity to discuss the ways we can assist in preparing those TLRs. Speaking of which, let's get in there to discuss. So for taking another step back, the purpose of the TLR again is to demonstrate your target market lending, demonstrate your adherence to that 60% target market requirement. And so in terms of the data that is being produced into those TLR files, we've seen some common pain points here in terms of being able to complete the TLR projects. And so, while we have the audience, we certainly want to call these out for awareness here among this group and anyone who's considering putting these reports together. First and foremost, PO boxes are never target market qualified, and therefore street addresses are really paramount here. Borrower household income data allows certain types of target markets to be included, and so the more loans for which there's income data, the better. This third bullet point here around borrower race and ethnicity, we know isn't going to apply to every credit union. You may not be collecting that data. You may be. There's some rules around how that information can be used for target market verification. And so, if you have that, we suggest including it. And we've seen some different strategies from different credit unions and their approach to this. including collecting the information, for example, at loan closing rather than at origination is one approach that we've seen be taken. So we know this is going to vary for different types of institutions. The real estate loan. So, we mentioned that street addresses are required for real estate loans. We often see collateral addresses as being something that is not a platted street address that results, pull back the curtain a little bit, that results in a address that is considered not accurate enough by the CDFI fund to be included in a target market calculation. And so something, we often see something like lot 44 for a home developed that doesn't yet have a street address. That's a challenge. There's different approaches to be address that, but just calling out that street addresses are really the language that the CDFI fund speaks in general. And so that is what we're going to want to include, when putting together the target market lending analysis. Finally, think of loans purchased as being peers to the loans that you originate in-house. If you originate $1 in-house and you originate $1 via purchase, that's $2 originated as far as the CDFI fund is concerned. And so for those purchases, we often see clients not have all of the data that they might have for those that are being originated in-house, but things like address, incomes, the amount of the loan purchase on a loan level basis, not aggregate basis. And the name of the selling institution is all data that goes into the TLR as well. So collecting, I think, maybe more data for loans that are purchased than many credit unions often do in our experience is a best practice here. So, the name of the presentation is not TLRs, it's CDFI data, and there is more data than just the TLRs, but candidly, we just got through a big TLR deadline. It's top of mind for our team, so we couldn't help but share insights into that process here when talking about CDFI data, but there is more than just transaction level data that gets submitted by CDFIs. And that's going to be different depending on where you are in the CDFI journey and what task you're seeking to accomplish. For those who have received grants, there are going to be assistance agreements that outline all of the information that you need to report. Everything that you need to report is in that assistance agreement. So follow that closely. You'll see that the two most important components of that are going to be your performance progress report and your uses of award funds. So when you, for example, receive an FA award, you'll have a performance goal associated there. That might be originating a certain amount of target market lending over the next 3 years. So you'll want to keep track of that as you submit your performance progress reports. Additionally, you'll have a use of award requirement. And so that will be utilizing your award dollars in one of the approved usage categories and documenting that with the CDFI fund annually during the performance period of the award. In addition to the awards, you'll be submitting annual certification reports, ACRs. That the new requirement is that those will be submitted 6 months after your fiscal year end. And a couple of data points that are maybe not often captured. We've talked a lot about core systems and such with the TLRs. Here, some of the requirements that are going to be required are development service impact and beneficiary account. So development services is the CDFI fund term for technical assistance. Things like credit counseling, financial education, those ought to be tracked and counted so that you can report on them in your ACR. Additionally, as your board member, your governing board or advisory board composition changes, you'll want to track the information for each new and outgoing board member to make sure that you're appropriately monitoring target market accountability. And so, these are this is all information that isn't necessarily going to be tracked in traditional core systems. So, think about how that information is being collected and recorded and how you'll ultimately be able to report on this info. So that, is really the type of data that you'll need to be able to collect. I think I went through that pretty quickly, and am happy to answer questions on it as we round out this presentation. But I'm going to pass it over to Jason to talk a little bit about how this all relates to your 2025 target market lending.
Thank you, Jeff. As Jeff mentioned earlier in the presentation, we have recently wrapped up completing transaction level reports for a number of clients. That meant we had a large set of lending data from 2024 that we decided to have our research team take a deeper dive into to see what insights they could find. And specifically what we had them do was we had them look at for every client from which we had done a mid-year lending analysis, so they're lending year to date at some point in the middle of 2024, and compared that to where they wound up at year end. And what we found was quite striking. So the first key takeaway here before I get into the charts is that we found that your mid-year lending is a very, very strong predictor of lending at year end. I'm not going to call it a crystal ball, but this does imply that taking an early look at your target market lending performance at some point earlier in the year gives you a very strong indication of where you might wind up at year end if you continue with business as usual. So diving into the charts here, what you'll see are two charts, two dumbbell charts. The one on the left looks at target market lending based on number of loans, and the one on the right looks at target market lending based on the dollar amount of loan. These are dumbbell charts, so they show for each of the 51 credit unions that were in our sample, their position at mid-year relative to their position at year end, and then the lines connecting those dots indicate the degree of change, how much their lending percentage shifted. The credit unions are sorted in ascending order based on target market lending percentage. So it's a little bit hard to see based on the size of the charts, but the x-axis here is that percentage of target market lending. The midpoint of the chart, of each chart, is the 60% mark. So dots that are to the right are those that exceeded that 60% target market lending threshold. Those to the left are ones that fell below it. Across the board, both in terms of number of loans and dollar amount of loans, like I said, we saw a very strong relationship between lending at mid-year versus where credit unions wound up at year end. There are some things to highlight here. First, in terms of like the statistical correlation, looking at number of loans, we found the mid-year lending had a correlation coefficient of 0.97 relative to year-end lending. Those of you who remember stats class will know that a perfect linear relationship is represented by a coefficient of 1. So 0.97 is really about as close as you will find in the real world. So this means there is a very, very strong linear relationship between mid-year and year-end lending in terms of the number of lending, the number of target market loans. Shifting to the dollar amount side, the R value, the correlation coefficient is a little bit lower at 0.95, but still a very, very strong predictor. Very, very strong linear relationship exists between dollar amount of lending at mid-year versus dollar amount of lending at year end. There are a few outliers to point out. Some of the longer bars in these charts do show that they're, while overall performance at mid-year was very consistent with the performance at year end, there were some credit unions that had strong shifts. The long green bars represent increases, and for most of these big green bars, these are clients that either deployed specific strategies to target lending towards their target market, so increased marketing or specific product campaigns aimed at boosting target market lending. But then we also have clients who leverage target market loan purchases as a way to close target market lending gaps that were identified earlier in the year. One thing I should mention here, one of the reasons behind the difference in the correlation between the mid-year and year-end lending percentages based on number of loans versus the dollar amount of loans is that a few large dollar loan transactions can have a very big impact on your overall target market lending percentages. So, for example, a large commercial real estate deal in the right census tract could have a very positive shift, very positive impact on your target market lending percentage. Similarly, if you're looking at loan purchases, going out and buying a large pool of loans from a certified CDFI or buying a single large target market qualifying loan from a non-CDFI can have a very, very large impact on your overall dollar amount of lending percentage, while only requiring, one or two transactions. In sum, we'd say the key takeaway for credit unions looking at these charts is, don't wait to find out that you've fallen short on your target market lending percentages at year end. Try to analyze your loan origination data, as early as possible in the year. We'd recommend starting at Q2, if not earlier. We just wrapped up Q2, so now is a prime time to take a look at the lending performance year to date. See where you stand relative to those 60% number and dollar amount target market lending thresholds, and then take action. Think about what action you could take to close any gaps identified at the end of the year so that you can continue to either work towards your goal of being able to submit a CDFI certification application next year, or if you're already certified, be assured that you will be able to retain that certification into the next year. I'm going to give a little bit of a plug for our software here. We offer consulting services, but we also have CDFI certification software, specifically a target market lending dashboard that lets you upload your loan origination and purchase data and see your target market lending percentages on a dashboard. We do encourage frequent uploads over the course of the year so that you can monitor those trends and then identify any shortfalls and take prompt action to close gaps well in advance of the year. We did have a number of clients that were in a scramble around Christmas time, trying to close deals in order to make up gaps. Most of them were successful, which is great. But I think all of them will tell you that if they could do it over again, they would rather have started that process at least a quarter in advance. So don't delay, start early. Please take a look at your data, and our team is more than happy to talk with you about different strategies to boost your target market lending percentage. We also have a network of lending partnerships that can help you source target market qualifying loans across a variety of asset classes to help you close any gaps. One other thing I'll note about the target market lending dashboard is different credit unions serve different types of target markets. In our dashboard, as Jeff mentioned, depending on the data you collect, if you've collected income data, you can look at your low-income targeted population. If you have borrower race and ethnicity, that opens up other targeted population target markets. Our dashboard will let you select the appropriate mix of target markets for your credit union, so you can both look at lending to your approved target markets if you're already certified and looking at your annual certification report next year, or if you're considering expanding into sort of a new target market, or thinking of ways to get your lending percentages up over 60% through a target market modification. The dashboard will give you an early look at what including those additional data points will do to your overall target market lending percentages. It also supports evaluation of the financial services option, that membership-based pathway to certification that opens up when you're above 60% in either the number or the dollar amount of target market lending, but between 50 and 60% for the other categories. So a really flexible tool that can give you visibility into what can often be a complicated and opaque process. With that, I think we're going to move on to our Q&A section. So I'm going to pull up the chat real quick. Excuse me.
Jason, I haven't seen any questions come in yet.
No questions.
Speaking to our comprehensive presentation. But for folks, if folks do have a question, please feel free to drop it in. We're happy to answer them.
Keep it open for another few seconds.
And just the Q&A button should be at the top of your screen among a few different options. So please click on that, and then there's a section to ask your question in the chat. So please do so there.
Yeah, I'm checking both the chat and the Q&A just to make sure we haven't missed any.
I got a question from Cheryl. Are we seeing many credit unions that are falling short in the TLR for this year's qualifications? From my perspective, we're seeing some. You know, in the chart that Jason shared earlier, you know, you see a distribution of credit unions on both sides of the 60% line. Those are folks that are, I would say, on the left, below 60% are really exploring, and those to the right are, you know, have sort of both feet in qualification. We did see the updating of the census tracks that I'm not even sure what the date was when they switched from the previous census vintage to the current one, but
24.
Yeah, so the new census tract list has fewer number of qualified census tracts. Therefore, some CDFIs may find themselves having a more unfavorable map that they would be serving, whereas a neighborhood previously would have been considered qualified that may not continue to be qualified. So we have worked with some clients who are going to find themselves letting their certification lapse and needing to prepare for a future application. You know, it's an unfortunate position to be in. And one of the ways to potentially avoid that is to do this mid-year lending analysis, because we do see it as being so predictive of what it will be at year end. So rather than having to let it lapse, being able to see, you know, around the corner, what will it be at year end, and therefore being able to deploy a mitigation strategy that will be, you know, a way to maintain certification.
I'll also add that the new rules around target market lending, especially around the customized investment areas, have made it a little bit more challenging for some, you know, certified CDFIs to continue to remain certified. For us, the bulk of, you know, looking at this list of clients, most of those clients were identified, you know, either in like the summer or fall of 2024. Looking at their mid-year lending results, some of them, you know, chose to try to take action to close gaps. But we had other clients who decided, you know, it didn't align well with their strategic priorities. Maybe they didn't have existing grant funds, and they were really just using CDFI for the member business lending cap exemption. So some of those clients intentionally chose to, you know, let their certification lapse, focus on other priorities, and then are planning to revisit things in the future. We do have some other clients that have started working with us more recently that found, you know, unfortunately were a little bit surprised when they looked in Q1 of 2025 that their year-end 2024 numbers did fall short. So that's kind of a painful position to be in. But I would say that the bulk of our CDFI clients who were already certified before the program rules went into effect and started working with us last year to make sure they were ready to reapply for certification this year. The vast majority of those clients were able to find a pathway over 60%.
A couple other questions came in, Jason. Emily asked what tools we are recommending for justifying target market selection. This is a question from someone who's deep into the application for certification, I can tell. And then they added a comment here. Jason, we can no longer see the presentation, but we can see.
I am not sure what happened.
Desktop.
I'm going to bring that back.
I mean, we may, all good. So to Emily's question, for she's specifically asking about one of the questions in the application in which you need to, when you apply for CDFI certification, you tell the CDFI fund what target markets you're proposing to serve. And then in some cases, you also have to provide an explanation of why that target market is considered to be underserved. So our approach to answer that question, Emily, is, we don't have more information really to answer that question than anybody else does. There's a lot of publicly available info that we think is sufficient for this, and that when we've completed applications for clients that have been approved, it uses typical data that you might find to describe economic distress. So does the target market have lower incomes relative to state or national levels? Are there higher rates of unemployment? Is there higher rates of poverty? Are there higher rates of underbanked or unbanked populations? That's the type of information that we would include when describing the need for a target market in a certification application.
One thing I might add there would be looking at your board composition, since there is a requirement for every target market that you serve, that you do have some level of either governing board or advisory board representation of that target market. So that can help guide you in selecting, which target markets are most applicable for your credit union. For example, if you do find that you have a majority of your governing board, or really, I think the threshold is 33%, 130 governing board, who happens to reside in those investment area qualified census tracts, then that's a strong case to go with an investment area target market. If you have board members that can provide representation for one of the other targeted population categories, that can also help make that decision. And I think it looks like the last question I see is, when will this recording be available? We're planning to publish it to our YouTube channel tomorrow.
And we'll send that out directly to attendees as well. And as well as some contact information. If you'd like to discuss any of these items further, or how we could be a resource, we'd be happy to continue the conversation. With that, Jason, I think there's been space to ask questions here, and it seems like it's wrapping up. One last call, otherwise we can let everyone get back to it, and we certainly appreciate your time and attention here for this.
Okay, I think that's a wrap. Well, thanks everyone for your time this afternoon. We hope you found this informative and valuable, and just look forward to connecting with some of you in the future. Have a great day.